Welcome back to the Flying with the Flock podcast, the best place to get all of your Eagles and other NFL related news. I'm your host, Matt, and for the third week, we have finally made it to a new milestone in the NFL season, that being the start of, the preseason for the Eagles at this point. Their first preseason game is tomorrow, Thursday the 7th at 7:30 p.m. So if you guys could drop a like and subscribe down below for that would be much appreciated. Over today's episode, we're going to cover some smaller camp news for the Eagles, stuff that's going on around the league. As of right now, we also still have hold-ins and holdouts, which is mostly just hold-ins at this point, and also Big Trouble in Big D. So, with all that being said, let's hop right into the news. Alright, so obviously, like I said, tomorrow's the first Eagles preseason game, the 7th. We are unsure if the Eagles will play their starters, and we know that the Bengals are playing their starters. Eagles normally don't play their starters week one of the preseason or at all to mitigate injury over the training camp period and preseason period as well. This both has, we've seen the pros and cons come out during the season of this. The Eagles' bodies, on average, tend to be a little bit more healthy. Doesn't mean somebody can't get banged up here, bruised up here, dinged up there, but on average, it seems like the Eagles players keep their body in more pristine shape if they're not playing in the preseason games. On the other hand, it has led to slow, sloppy starts at the beginning of seasons the past 2 years. Yes, you could argue that it was a pretty sharp start with the Chargers game, or not the Chargers game, the Packers game in Brazil. I'm already thinking of this year. But looking at it, after that, they just couldn't find their timing, which is something that you have to build up in preseason. That's why you see the Bills starters all take one series of snaps. That's why you see Cowboy starters take one series of snaps. Chiefs, it might be like everybody but like Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and Chris Jones. But yeah, you see all these good teams build up rhythm early on through the preseason, which is why I kind of do feel like it might be important for us to maybe put our starters out there for one series and have them build connections, build chemistry, and show that on the field rather than just on the training camp field. Obviously, we do have some Eagles injuries to starters, so it's not like you would see all the starters anyway, and be able to build rhythm and chemistry through that exchange there on the field. But overall, if we just see some form of starters taking snaps in the preseason, I feel like it will overall aid the Eagles early on more than it has these past 2 seasons. Jalen Hurts has had sort of a rebound from a shaky streak of practice days at camp, ultimately looking pretty solid. I mean, yesterday alone he went 12 for 20, 5 touchdowns, and 1 interception. The 5 touchdowns are mainly because they were running a lot of different red zone situations. So don't really read too much into the stats, which is exactly what we said last week. But now, definitely don't read into these stats here. Yeah. So we'll get into some of the battles here in a second here, but the injury bug has gotten maybe slightly better, but not a whole lot. Zach Bond still has a back contusion. AJ Brown is dealing with a hamstring. Running back Montreal Johnson Jr. is dealing with a hamstring. Defensive tackle Byron Young has a groin. All of these guys have been out of practice at least 2 days consecutively so far, if not at most 6 straight practices. So Zach Bond is slightly concerning, but a back contusion can take a little bit to heal. It's not an overnight process. So as long as he can take time off and then be on the field by week 1, I don't think it's really a big deal. Same thing with AJ Brown. He's had hamstring issues in the past. Mainly, we saw it last season, early on, week 2, week 3. Those 2 games, ultimately, the Eagles looked less than their premium selves because they didn't have an A.J. Brown, who dominated in the Packers game, week 1, and then also didn't have a Devontae Smith due to a nasty concussion. So we just need A.J. Brown to kind of nurse this back to health, and ultimately, hopefully, he'll be back for week 1. I've seen a couple different reports. I forget who it was, but it's not as severe as one may think at first. Kind of giving me hope that, hey, we're going to have a shot here at A.J. Brown and Zach Bond both being ready by week 1. You also, obviously, like I mentioned, Montreal Johnson Jr. and Byron Young both are out. Both are vying for not a starting spot, vying for just a roster spot in general on the 53-man roster. So ultimately, these loss of snaps due to injury are fairly important for these 2 guys, because Montreal Johnson Jr., I believe, is trying to vie for RB3, and Byron Young is just looking to get into the rotation at defensive tackle. 2 guys that have been really huge at training camp have been Josh Uche and Moro Ojomo, both on the defensive line, which we'd like to see a little bit more depth at both the edge rusher and the defensive tackle spots. So hopefully these guys continue to shine, and hopefully they continue to put pressure on the starters to improve their game. And then lastly, we have some of the we have some guys that are off to the side that are not fully participated, but they're limited. You have safety Lewis Cine with a hamstring. They have Trevor Keegan listed as a center here, which is interesting to me, but he has a back injury. Wide receiver Terrence Marshall Jr., corner Mac McWilliams with a quad, safety Andrew Mabuka with a shoulder, and offensive line Matt Pryor with a shoulder. Now, looking at some of the battles going on at Eagles training camp, right now it seems like Kyle McCord has taken over the QB3 spot, only because he's looked more consistent over DTR, which is not overly surprising at this point. Ultimately, taking a look at it, I wouldn't mind. Obviously, these preseason games are going to play a huge factor in who's going to win that spot and who can conduct this Eagles offense a little bit more. But overall, I do feel like Kyle McCord will most likely lock this QB3 spot up by the 3rd preseason game. Azeez Ojulari versus Jalix Hunt has kind of, for the other starting edge rusher spot, has kind of quieted down. Azeez Ojulari, although he might have had some good starts here at the starting spot, some good reps. Ultimately, he's kind of cooled off, whereas Jalix Hunt has started to take steps forward to up his game a little bit now that he's at training camp. So I do feel like J-Lex Hunt will ultimately lock this down in a couple of weeks. We already found out from Kevin Petula, the offensive coordinator for the Eagles, that Tyler Steen has already secured the right guard spot. So it's not like that's even in the question anymore. So Tyler Steen will be your starting right guard week 1. Kenyon Green will ultimately be a backup, and it seems like they have Trevor Keegan moving over to the center position for more depth behind Cam Jurgens. Lastly, a big battle that has been affected by injuries, so we still don't 100% know what this position is going to look like, and we probably won't until the end of the preseason games, is the starting safety position alongside Reed Blankenship, that being the battle of Sidney Brown versus Andrew Mabuka. Obviously, I mentioned earlier that Andrew Mabuka was limited with a shoulder injury anyway. He's been out of practice and limited for the past couple of days, but I just figured that I'd keep you updated on that with how much it affects this battle. Sidney Brown has not been stellar, but he's been consistent, apparently. He hasn't been like a breakout star, but he's been a solid starter at the safety spot, and he hasn't been injured either. So that kind of adds some more validity to the statement that he will ultimately be the starting safety week 1. Andrew Mabuka, and especially, I mean, you saw it, I would say, more with Cooper DeJean last year, but Vic Fangio wants these rookies to vie for their starting spot. You're not just coming in and expecting to start. You have to fight for it, and you have to do that by taking reps. So Andrew Mabuka losing out on that, although he looked decent when he was out starting at the beginning of training camp, ultimately now taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture, Sidney Brown has kind of started to close the door on the conversation. Now, these preseason games are going to be very important for these two to see who comes out on top. I wouldn't be surprised if they play next to each other if they're not playing starters. But we'll just have to wait and see. Ultimately, I do feel like Sidney Brown, like I said earlier, has taken the step forward and has started to close the door on the conversation a little bit. Alright, so let's get to some news from around the league. The Chargers beat the Lions in the Hall of Fame game 34-7. Trey Lance had a pretty outstanding first half, dicing up the Lions' backups 13-20 for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. And that doesn't mean that this is anything special. Again, it's against the Lions' backups, who really aren't that great anyway. But ultimately, a solid start for this Jim Harbaugh-run Chargers team. Rough start for this Lions team, but ultimately I'm not that concerned. Once week 1 comes, teams will start to prove themselves who they really are. We're not going to really know through these preseason games. We might get ideas of like styles of the offense teams might run and styles of defense teams might run, but we have Trey Lance, arguably one of the biggest draft busts in recent history, dicing up a team in the preseason. It's going to make headlines for the NFL, but ultimately won't do much in the long run. Here's a story that I'm just keeping an eye on, but I have no clue what it's going to do. The ESPN has acquired the NFL Red Zone and NFL Network as a whole from the NFL themselves in exchange for 10% ownership in ESPN. So now the NFL owns 10% of ESPN, and I said that right. NFL owns 10% of ESPN, and now ESPN owns a lot of different things for broadcasting, specifically for the NFL. So I wouldn't be surprised if the NFL Network as a whole stays as a separate entity and has like game day morning still Obviously, red zone staying around. I wouldn't be surprised if it stays in the same location. It just now gets a bump up in production quality, and also probably changing some faces as well, unfortunately. But it's more of a wait and see. I have zero clue ultimately what this means, but I do feel like this is somewhat important when it comes to the future of the NFL, is now they are more heavily partnered with the ESPN. Here's a fun little story. The NFL bans ammonia inhalers, aka smelling salts. Most of you that are probably listening to this knows exactly what it is, so I'm not really going to go into depth on the history and all that kind of stuff, but just know that this is used for players to zero in and focus, especially if they have a concussion. Sometimes this is used, though it's not supposed to be. This is probably a smart move to help preserve player health over the long haul. You've had players like George Kittle mourn the loss of smelling salts and even say that they start to question whether they're going to retire because they can't use it. A player I know that plays at the D1 level says that this may not be a smart move for the game of football in general at all different levels. Because if the NFL does it, it's all going to start to trickle down as well. This is not really a smart move overall, but players can use them a lot depending on the person, but most of them don't use it at all. So realistically, you could make the argument that maybe it's an enhancer on the game, but ultimately, looking how it is now, they're gone. So players are going to mourn this loss, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see the drop in some production by certain players, but ultimately we will see how this affects player health over the long term in maybe a decade or two. Another interesting situation that continues to keep developing into insanity, that being the Browns quarterback room. Experts have the Browns keeping 4 quarterbacks on the active roster: Flacco, Pickett, Gabriel, and Sanders in that specific order. All of these experts have Sanders listed as the 4th QB due to injury sidelining Sanders, giving Gabriel a leg up on the QB3 battle there. They have been rumored on trading somebody from that QB room and trying to get some trade compensation for it, but I wouldn't be surprised if this does not end up happening. Sanders will start on Friday during the Browns preseason game. So does that mean that he's actually ahead of Gabriel in the QB standings in the clubhouse? I guess we'll see who comes out on top. This continues to be a really weird situation that ultimately we don't know. I'm going to assume Flacco starts and Pickett's the starter behind him or the backup, but Gabriel and Sanders could really flip either way, and it depends on how accurate and how they look leading this offense as a whole. Alright, so now we got hold-ins and holdouts, but mostly just hold-ins at this point. We do have some happy news from the hold-ins side of things. So we can say goodbye to Rams running back Kyren Williams, who officially got paid a 3-year, $33 million extension. That includes $23 million guaranteed. I believe that makes him the highest paid running back, or might be second highest behind Saquon. But that's a pretty good deal. We're starting to see the running back market come back and stabilize where it probably should be. Ultimately, Kyren Williams got paid. He's a young stud at the running back position. Good pass catcher, good runner. But ultimately, well-deserved. And I'm excited to see what Kyren Williams continues to do on this Rams offense and how Sean McVay continues to pull the most out of this young guy. Ultimately, great signing for both the Rams and Kyren Williams, keeping this marriage here together. So congrats on leaving the hold-ins. We'll get back to Micah in a little bit. Interesting developments from Bills running back James Cook. He is also, similar to Kyren Williams, seeking a long-term deal before his rookie contract ends. It is still unclear where the Bills and James Cook kind of stand in discussion. It looks like the Bills currently still want James Cook to continue to practice. James Cook did walk out of practice, and took off his gear and stuff and came back and sat on the sideline back on this past Saturday. And this is the Bills general manager, Brandon Beane's first holdout of his Bills tenure, which is, I think, close to 9 years. So ultimately, he's trying to navigate this tricky situation while also trying to compensate Cook for his actual worth. Now, at the end of the day, it's hard for a running back that has a quarterback like a Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, or a Joe Burrow to kind of argue that they need to get paid top dollar because they are the most important part of the offense. Because if you take a look, their quarterbacks are top tier and they can carry their own weight. So it's just really weird, this situation. I doubt that James Cook is going to miss week 1. I wouldn't be surprised if, similar to the Kyren Williams deal, it just comes out of nowhere and he gets paid. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see James Cook start to practice probably by next week, and then it gets announced later in the week that he's signing a new contract extension. So, yeah, James Cook, he kind of understands that his worth is probably not as high as somebody like a Kyren Williams or a Saquon Barkley, but he still wants to get paid what he's deserved because he does help out Josh Allen every once in a while. Another hold-in, Trey Hendrickson, though the Bengals superstar edge who's been holding out since February, but now that he's a hold-in, now he's at practice. Apparently, conversation between the two parties, both the Bengals and Trey Hendrickson, are continuing to move forward. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some resolution with that in the coming weeks. And ultimately, Trey Hendrickson getting the payday he most likely deserves at this point. Lastly, Terry McLaurin has officially requested a trade from the Commanders. And is not going to practice until then. Commanders put him on the PUP list, the physically unable to perform list with an ankle injury. So I'm not entirely surprised that Scary Terry is not going to be practicing. And there have been rumors that teams have reached out to the Commanders, i.e. the Steelers, i.e. the Patriots, and talks have not really gone that far. I wouldn't be surprised if McLaurin really puts his foot down on this, that he ultimately gets moved to a different team. So we'll just still have to see what's going to happen. There's been no real news out of either camp, and it doesn't seem like they're anywhere close to a deal. So Terry McLaurin is still going to be a questionable for week 1 kind of decision at this point. All right, so staying on disgruntled superstars in the NFC East, now going on to big trouble in Big D. Micah Parsons tweeted a very long statement of essentially saying that he no longer wants to be in Dallas and that he no longer wants any ties to the Cowboys in general. Ultimately saying that he felt like he was cornered into trying to make a deal during just off-season conversations with Jerry Jones, and that they are saying that a deal is already done to Micah Parsons' agent, although they haven't talked to Micah Parsons' agent before that and haven't talked to him since. So I just feel like ultimately something is bound to give in the next week or so. I wouldn't be. Micah Parsons has also liked a photo of him as like a Rams edge rusher. So ultimately, this saga continues to get more and more juicy. But this is a good thing ultimately for the Eagles as a whole, with both of their two rivals in the NFC East that can actually put up a fight. Giants. That these two teams are starting to fumble the bag a little bit here. Ultimately, I can see this going one of two ways. And one way is more likely than the other. And you could probably already guess which two ways you think I'm going to think this goes. One, he signs a little bit before the Thursday night matchup in week 1 between the Eagles and Cowboys. So the Cowboys have big headlines going into the game. Or the one that it's harder for me to see this happening, but if it happens, it's going to be like a curveball, is Micah Parsons really gets traded out of Dallas with 1 year left on his contract. And that's if Jerry Jones becomes too frustrated with the entire situation, which he's already said to reporters and fans not to lose sleep over this situation. But if I'm Jerry Jones, I'm panicking a little bit because this guy sets the standard for the entire defense. So, and with him seeming buddy-buddy during joint practices with Rams players, I wouldn't be surprised if we see him try to pull a fast one and try to get recruited by another team and get used to another team if ultimately he doesn't re-sign by the end of this year. So yeah, I know that seemed a little bit confusing, probably, but there's just not really much to go off as of right now. I kind of wish that there's a little bit more juice to this story, but ultimately, I just don't see a situation where Micah gets traded out of Dallas. He's a superstar, and Dallas needs stars, according to Jerry Jones. Alright, so I think that's going to be it for this episode. I was maybe going to go over some record predictions for different divisions, but I might save that till we get closer to the start of the season. I want to thank you guys for listening in this episode. This episode was a little bit more rambly, I feel like. I didn't have as much to go off of because we're just gearing up for the Eagles preseason game. Next week, I'll definitely be covering a lot of the raw stats like I did during the regular season last year. But and I'll give you maybe some insight onto some fantasy football as well. So for all of that, stay tuned. And until next time, I love you guys. And remember, go Birds.